You fix this engine and I'll marry you. Her voice snapped through the conference room like a whip. Laughter followed sharp, rehearsed, the kind of laughter meant to wound. A polished table, glass walls, and a city skyline shimmering behind them. Yet all anyone could see was the stain on his apron. The woman leaned forward, manicured finger pointed at the machine like it was a circus trick. Her smile wasn't playful, it was cruel. Behind her, men in tailored suits folded their arms, smirking as if they'd just witnessed the day's entertainment. On the other side of the table, the black man stood tall, oil on his uniform, calloused hands steady on the steel edge. His badge read, maintenance, but his eyes read something else. Patience honed like a blade. He didn't flinch. He didn't smile. The laughter grew louder. This isn't a garage, man. Careful, don't get grease on the carpet. Each word fell heavy, but he carried them the way he always had, silently, shoulders squared. His presence filled the room without needing permission. For a moment, the engine between them became more than bolts and wires. It was a test, not of skill, but of belonging. And every snicker, every sideways glance said the same thing, you don't belong here. But he did not move. Instead, his gaze lifted slowly from the machine to meet hers. The smile on her lips faltered, just a hair. She expected embarrassment, maybe anger. What she found instead was silence, sharp and deliberate, like the calm before thunder. The young intern in the corner hesitated, phone half raised. Should he record? Should he step in? His thumb hovered. The tension in the room was thick enough to hear. And then, the man spoke low, even, steady. I can fix this. The words were simple, almost too soft against the walls of glass and steel, but they landed like a hammer. The laughter cracked, scattered. A few voices still chuckled, but unease crept in. The kind of unease that comes when someone refuses to play the role you wrote for them. The woman tilted her head, trying to keep the joke alive. We'll see about that, she said, her voice sugar-laced with venom. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. He was already working, not with tools, but with silence, with presence, with the weight of something none of them saw coming. And before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to him, the man they mocked as a mechanic, the man they laughed out of the room before he had even begun. What they didn't know, he wasn't just here to fix the engine. He was here to break their illusion. The room still buzzed with laughter, but beneath it ran a hum of disbelief. Who was this man, standing silent in coveralls, daring to occupy space reserved for board members and polished shoes? His name tag read, Maintenance, but the truth was heavier than that thin strip of plastic. His name was carved into the very foundation of the company. He was its architect, its lifeblood, its largest shareholder. Yet none of them knew. Not today. That was the point. He had walked into this building without an entourage, without the sheen of tailored suits or the armor of a luxury watch. Instead, he wore grease stains and steel-toed boots. The disguise was not weakness, it was strategy. To strip away the symbols and see what remained. To test them. Because he had seen this script before. At 23, denied entry into a dealership because his credit card looked fake. At 31, called lucky after buying out a supplier who once refused to meet with him. And now, standing at 42, the script had barely changed. Same sneers, new faces. The woman across the table smirked, still treating him like an amusement. You're quiet now, she said, cocking her head. Maybe you realize this is above your pay grade. He didn't answer. He ran his fingers lightly along the metal casing of the engine, eyes narrowing not at the machine, but at the crowd. He noted their folded arms, the mocking grins, the way one man whispered to another as if they were sharing a private joke. Only one figure wasn't laughing, the intern near the corner. His phone lowered slowly, his expression caught between shame and awe. He'd never seen confidence look like this. Quiet, grounded, immovable. The man in coveralls finally straightened, his voice calm. You think this is about pay grades? It's not. It's about respect. A chuckle rose from the back. Respect is earned, not handed out. He looked at the speaker, unblinking. I earned more than you could imagine. The room fell uneasy again, the laughter thinning. The woman scoffed, trying to reclaim control. Big words for someone wearing a janitor's uniform. That uniform, yes. The same one he'd worn 20 years ago in a dim garage with a leaking roof, back when nobody believed in him. It was no insult. It was a memory, a reminder. The irony was almost too much. She thought the uniform diminished him. She didn't know it was his armor. And while they mistook silence for submission, he knew better. Silence was leverage. Patience was power. In the reflection of the glass walls, he caught sight of himself, coveralls, grease, determination, and behind him, the skyline of the city he helped build. What they couldn't see yet. The contract signed under his name, the patents filed, the board seats secured. He wasn't here to prove he could fix their engine. He was here to see if they could fix their prejudice. And already, they were failing. The silence didn't last. It never does. From the far side of the room, a man in a navy suit pushed off the wall, his voice dripping with contempt. Respect? You're standing in grease-stained coveralls talking about respect. This is a boardroom, not a back alley shop. Laughter flickered again, nervous this time. Another voice cut in higher, sharper. Someone call security. He's wasting our time. The woman smirked, seizing the momentum. Yes, maybe that's best. We can't let just anyone wander into executive space. Who let him in anyway? Her question was pointed, but her eyes never left him, like she needed to see the flinch, needed proof that her words had landed. He gave her nothing. Instead, he leaned casually against the table, one hand resting near the tangle of wires and steel, the other steady at his side. The engine between them hummed faintly, like a beast waiting to be woken. The intern shifted, uncomfortable. His phone now hung limp at his side, but his eyes darted from the woman to the man in coveralls, then back again. The weight of the room pressed against him, begging him to stay silent. From the doorway, the assistant manager, a man with a silver tie clip, stepped in, drawn by the rising voices. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, though the answer was already in the air. "Yes," the woman snapped. She jabbed her finger toward the man. "This mechanic thinks he belongs at this table." The words stung for their precision. Not just mechanic, this mechanic. A title wielded like a blade. The assistant manager frowned. "Sir, if you don't have business here, I'll have to ask you to leave." Still, he didn't move. He remembered moments like this before. 25 years old, turned away from a bank counter for asking to withdraw his own money. 32, laughed out of a hotel lobby because his suit wasn't polished enough. Every room had its gatekeepers. Every room tested his patience. Now the room was testing again. He finally spoke, voice low, unshaken. "You want me out because of what I wear. But tell me what happens when the clothes change and I'm still standing here." For a heartbeat, silence. Then the man in the navy suit scoffed. Big talk for someone seconds away from being escorted out. He pulled out his phone, dialing. "Yeah, send security up to conference 12. The intern's eyes widened. Guests whispered. The woman laughed softly, satisfied. But the man in coveralls didn't flinch. He never did. Instead, he placed both hands on the engine, leaned forward, and let his words cut through the noise. "You think this is about an engine, but it's about something else entirely. And when I'm done, none of you will laugh the same way again." The laughter stopped. Not because they believed him, but because for the first time, they weren't sure they didn't. The phone call ended with a curt promise. "Security is on the way." The man in the navy suit slipped his device back into his pocket, shoulders squared as if he had won a battle. The woman folded her arms, lips curved into a half smile. But the man in coveralls didn't move. He remained at the table, hands steady against cold steel, eyes fixed not on the engine but on the faces around it. His silence was deliberate, not weakness but armor. The louder they laughed, the quieter he became, and somehow that quiet unsettled them more than shouting ever could. "You hear me?" the woman pressed. "This is executive space. We don't have time for games." Still nothing. The intern shifted in his chair, his heart pounding against his ribs. He had never seen anyone withstand ridicule like this. No stammering defense, no desperate plea, just stillness. It reminded him of standing near the ocean before a storm, the waves retreating, the air thick with what was coming. The assistant manager cleared his throat, nervous now. "Sir, perhaps you should wait outside until security arrives." The man's gaze lifted at last, slow and measured. His eyes locked on the assistant manager, pinning him in place without a single raised word. "I've waited outside my whole life," he said quietly. "I'm done waiting." Ugh. The sentence hung in the air, heavier than any insult that had been thrown. Even the suits at the back straightened, uneasy. The woman laughed again, too loudly. Dramatic, very dramatic. But silence won't save you. You're still nothing more than a mechanic. The word echoed, bouncing off the glass walls. Mechanic, meant to shrink him. Instead, it reminded him. He thought back to long nights under a corrugated roof, hands deep in broken machines, no money for new parts. Every bolt turned had been a lesson, every repair an act of survival. What they called small was the very craft that built empires. What they mocked was the same skill that had carried him into boardrooms they couldn't imagine. He lowered his eyes to the engine once more. A faint hum vibrated through the metal. He brushed a wire gently, listening, like a doctor reading a pulse. To them it looked like fiddling. To him it was memory. The room grew restless. "Why is he still here?" someone muttered. "Because silence is not absence. Silence is presence amplified." The man straightened, exhaled, and said nothing more. He didn't need to. The weight of his stillness pressed against every wall, every polished shoe, every forced smile, and in that silence, the first cracks appeared. The silence held like glass fragile, shimmering, one wrong touch away from breaking. Then it cracked. From the corner, the intern shifted again. His phone, still in his palm, trembled. The red light blinked faintly. He hadn't meant to start recording, but he couldn't stop now. Something told him this moment mattered. The woman caught him out of the corner of her eye. "Put that away," she snapped. "This is company business." Her command ricocheted across the room, sharper than she intended. Heads turned. Some frowned. Others looked embarrassed, as if suddenly aware that the laughter they'd joined had curdled into something uglier. The intern's voice wavered, but it carried. "Why? Afraid of what people might see." A hush. The kind that follows when the wrong person dares to speak the truth. The assistant manager barked, "That's enough. You're out of line." But the intern didn't lower his phone. He looked straight at the man in coveralls, then back at the crowd. "He hasn't raised his voice once. He hasn't threatened anyone. And yet you're calling security? Why?" The question landed harder than it should have, because everyone in the room already knew the answer. The man in coveralls remained still, but his eyes met the intern's steady, measured, grateful without words. Another voice broke through, this time from the doorway. A client, mid-50s, briefcase in hand, had paused when he heard the commotion. He stepped closer, brows furrowed. "I walked in on this, and I need to say it doesn't look good, not for you." The woman's composure faltered. "This has nothing to do with you." It does," the client said firmly. "Because I'm a shareholder, and I see how you treat people who don't look the part." The room shifted. Suddenly, the smirks didn't feel safe. Suddenly, the laughter seemed dangerous. The man in coveralls finally spoke, quiet but cutting. "The truth doesn't need a microphone, it just needs witnesses." The intern swallowed hard, then lifted his phone higher. "Then let's witness." For the first time, the woman's smile broke. Her eyes flicked toward the door, desperate for security to arrive. But security wasn't here yet. Only the truth was. And in that fragile gap between the silence of one man and the voice of another, the balance in the room began to tilt. The door swung wider. Not security, not yet. A senior manager strode in, gray suit pressed, tie knotted like a noose of authority. He scanned the room, then fixed on the man in coveralls as though the answer was obvious. "What's going on here?" The woman wasted no time. "He doesn't belong." He wandered into executive space. "We're handling it." The senior manager's jaw tightened. "This is a private boardroom. Sir, you need to leave immediately." Still, the man in coveralls didn't move. His silence stretched again, deliberate, heavy. It was the same silence that had unsettled them all, but now, with the intern's phone recording and the client at the door, it carried weight. The manager took a step closer, voice sharper. "Did you hear me? You don't belong here. This room is for decision makers, not janitors looking for a paycheck." The word janitor hung in the air like smoke. Some shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. The intern flinched. The client frowned deeper, but the laughter thin, brittle started again from the back of the room. One man muttered just loud enough, "Should have stuck to fixing cars." Another chuckled. The woman leaned against the table, satisfied. "See? Even leadership agrees. You're wasting everyone's time." The man in coveralls finally raised his head, eyes narrowing not in anger, but in recognition. He had heard those exact words before, 20 years ago, when a loan officer had laughed at his first business proposal. Waste of time, they said. Yet here he stood, decades later, built on that very waste. He let the memory steady him. His voice emerged calm, low, steady. You keep saying I don't belong. Funny thing about that, I've heard it before. At banks, at hotels, at airports. Same words, different mouths. The manager scoffed. Because it's true. People like you don't make decisions in this room. The client stepped forward, sharp now. People like him? Careful with your words. But the manager waved him off. I don't answer to you. He turned back, finger jabbing toward the man in coveralls. Security will be here any second. You'll be out and we'll get back to real business. For the first time, the man allowed a hint of a smile. Not wide, not mocking, just the quiet kind that comes when a storm approaches, and only he knows how hard it will break. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He simply stood there, still as stone, letting the room damn itself with every word. And above the hum of the city outside, a truth was forming, one they couldn't yet see. The tension finally snapped. The senior manager, his patience thinning, stepped forward with sudden force. He reached for the man's chest and ripped the small plastic name badge clean off his coveralls. The sound was sharp, humiliating plastic against fabric, a tearing louder than it should have been. Enough, the manager barked, holding the badge up like a trophy. Mechanics don't belong in boardrooms. You're done here. A hush fell. Even those who had been laughing seconds earlier went still. The woman smirked, satisfied, as if the act had sealed the matter. Good. Now, escort him out before security has to drag him. But the man in coveralls didn't move. He simply looked at the badge dangling from the manager's fingers, then back into his eyes. No anger, no panic. Just a silence so cold it made the manager step back half an inch without realizing it. Throw him out! Someone shouted from the back. The words came desperate now, not confident. A chant trying to hold its ground against something heavier. The intern gasped, phone shaking in his hand. Did you just tear his ID? The client near the door muttered under his breath. Unbelievable. He spoke louder this time. That's not enforcement. That's assault. The manager ignored him. He turned to the woman, voice pitched higher. Security should be here any second. We'll have this fraud gone. As if on cue, the glass door slid wider. Two uniformed guards stepped inside, scanning the room with practiced indifference. One of them tightened his grip on the radio strapped to his shoulder. Who called this in? The woman pointed swiftly at the man in coveralls. Him. He's trespassing. Remove him. The guard stepped forward. The air thickened, charged like static before lightning. Every face turned, waiting for the man to flinch, to plead, to resist. He didn't. Instead, he stood rooted, arms at his side, gaze steady as stone. His voice, when it came, was quiet, yet somehow louder than every command that had filled the room. You think tearing off a badge erases who I am? His eyes cut to the manager, then swept across the crowd. You think uniforms make you worthy, and silence makes me weak? No one answered. Not yet. The guards hesitated, waiting for clarity. Even they seemed uncertain, because the man in front of them radiated not fear, but authority. And in that fragile hesitation, the balance of the room trembled. The insult had been made. The line crossed. The storm was here. The guards stood ready, eyes flicking between the woman, the senior manager, and the man in coveralls. The command was clear, remove him, but something in his stillness made their hands hesitate. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached into his pocket. The room stiffened. The guard's shoulders tensed, but instead of resistance, he lifted a sleek black phone and pressed one button. Carla, he said evenly, his voice calm as glass. Activate protocol. Begin recording from the network side. Log every word, every action in this room. A pause, then a crisp female voice filled the speaker. Understood, sir. Audio and video feeds synchronized. Internal compliance is receiving live data. The effect was immediate. The intern's jaw dropped. The client at the door blinked, startled. Even the guards shifted slightly, eyes narrowing. What is this? The woman demanded. Her laugh faltered, too sharp, too forced. The man in coveralls didn't look at her. He kept his phone raised, voice steady. Carla, confirm timestamp. Note the removal of my badge by force. Note the attempt to summon security without due process. Confirmed, Carla replied. Incident logged at 3:17 p.m. Evidence archived. The senior manager scoffed, trying to regain ground. Nice trick. Some assistant on the other end doesn't make you legitimate. The man turned his head, finally meeting his eyes. She doesn't need to make me legitimate. She only needs to make you accountable. The words sliced deeper than a shout. The room shifted again, whispers now, nervous, uneasy. The woman's smile was gone. The intern lifted his phone higher, his courage building. It's true. I saw him tear the badge off. I saw it. Oh. The client stepped forward. And I'll testify to that. The manager's face flushed red. Enough, guards. But the guards hesitated. One finally asked, Sir, do you have identification? The man's eyes didn't waver. Check the system. You'll find more than you expect. He lowered the phone slightly, his silence returning heavy, purposeful. It was no longer just patience. It was a warning. The storm was no longer approaching. It had arrived, and he was the one holding the lightning. The room was frozen, caught between doubt and unease. The woman's voice cracked through the tension. Enough games. He's stalling. Security, take him out now. But the guards didn't move. Their radios buzzed faintly, systems syncing, as if waiting for something bigger than her command. The man in coveralls exhaled once, slow. Then, at last, he spoke not to the woman, not to the guards, but to the entire room. You've mocked me for my uniform. You've called me mechanic, janitor, fraud. His eyes swept across every face, pinning each one in place. But here's what you didn't know. He lifted his phone again. Carla, confirm identity. The speaker carried her clear, steady voice. Verification complete. James Carter, Chief Executive Officer and majority shareholder of Carter Dynamics. Authorized access level. Founder. The words detonated like thunder in the glass-walled room. Gasps. Stifled curses. A silence so sudden it felt physical, pressing against the chest of everyone present. The intern's phone shook in his hands as he whispered to himself, He's the CEO. He owns this. The client stepped back, stunned. Carter? As in Carter Dynamics? His voice dropped, reverent now. My God. The woman's smirk evaporated, leaving only a pale mask. No, that's impossible. He's lying. But the guards had already checked their devices. One looked up, eyes wide. She's not lying. His ID is in the system. Executive clearance, owner level. The senior manager's mouth opened, then shut again. For the first time, he had nothing. The man James Carter straightened, no longer the silent mechanic they thought he was. His voice cut through the room like steel. You wanted me out of this room. He gestured calmly to the table, the skyline beyond. But this room exists because of me. These engines exist because of me. Every contract you brag about traces back to my signature. And every insult you've thrown only reveals how little you understand who you work for. No one laughed now. The silence was different, no longer contemptuous, but terrified. James stepped closer to the table, his eyes on the badge still trembling in the manager's fist. You tore this off thinking it stripped me of identity. But plastic doesn't define me. Ownership does. Vision does. Power does. He let the words settle, heavy and undeniable. I am not the man you tried to humiliate. I am the man who built what you stand on. And today, his voice sharpened, final, I'm done watching you tear down what I created. The storm had broken. The revelation detonated in the room, and the shock waves rippled fast. The senior manager froze, the plastic badge still trembling between his fingers. His knuckles whitened, but his confidence had bled out, leaving only the pale ghost of authority. He tried to speak, but no sound came. The woman staggered back half a step, her heels clacking against polished tile. No, this isn't possible. Her voice faltered, brittle. He can't be Carter. But the guards confirmed again, their tablets glowing with system logs. CEO, majority shareholder, founder. Each word they spoke was another nail in the coffin of denial. The intern's phone caught everything. His breathless whisper turned into something louder, steadier. He's the one. He's the owner. He panned the camera across the suits who had laughed only minutes earlier, their smirks now twisted into panic. From the doorway, the client who had spoken before let out a sharp laugh, not mocking but incredulous. I invested in Carter Dynamics years ago, and you're telling me you mocked the man who built it? He shook his head slowly. Unbelievable. The whisper spread like fire through dry grass. He's the CEO, the founder, the boss. Each voice carried the truth further until the entire boardroom felt suffocated by it. The woman tried again, her voice shrill. You should have said who you were from the beginning. James Carter's eyes turned to her, calm but cutting. If I had, would you have shown who you truly are? She faltered, her mouth opening and closing, no words left. The senior manager's bravado cracked entirely. His hand dropped the stolen badge, plastic clattering against the floor. He reached instinctively for his phone, as though an urgent call might erase what just happened. But his hands shook too hard to unlock it. In the corner, the intern's camera caught the moment perfectly. The powerful reduced to stammering, the arrogant stripped bare. And beyond the glass walls, the city skyline reflected back a truth none of them could escape. James Carter had turned their world inside out in minutes. The guards stepped back, no longer a threat. One of them muttered under his breath. We nearly laid hands on the CEO. Guests who had lingered by the hallway now crowded closer, phones raised, recording, whispering. Some clapped softly, not in celebration but in awe. Every pair of eyes swung back to James, and he stood there, silent once more, letting the weight of revelation crush the room without lifting a finger. The silence stretched like a noose, tightening around every guilty throat in the room. James Carter didn't rush. He let them stew in it, let them feel the weight of their own words echoing back at them. Then, with the same calm he had carried all along, he lifted his phone again. Carla, the speaker chimed. Yes, sir. Terminate access for Gregory Vaughn, senior manager. Effective immediately. Remove all credentials. Freeze accounts. A stunned gasp tore through the room. Gregory's face drained of color as the guard nearest him checked his badge. The red light blinked once, then locked him out forever. James didn't stop. His voice was steady, each name pronounced like a gavel strike. Terminate access for Julia Trent. The woman stumbled back, eyes wide. You can't... Her protest cut off as her badge buzzed and went dark in her hand. She looked at it like it had betrayed her. And Thomas Hale, James continued, immediate removal. Document today's conduct for legal review. Carla's voice answered each command with perfect precision. Processing. Confirmed. Confirmed. Logged. The room unraveled. The once confident suits looked small now, shrinking into their chairs, whispers curling into frantic excuses. You can't do this, Gregory stammered, his voice trembling. I already did, James replied, unblinking. You mocked me in a company I built. You tore off my name as if it was yours to erase. Consider this, your last act under Carter Dynamics. Julia tried again, desperation sharp in her tone. We didn't know. James cut her off, his words clean as steel. That's the problem. You didn't care to know. You assumed. And now you live with the cost. The guards exchanged uneasy glances. A moment ago, they had been ready to drag him out. Now they stood silently, watching as the true balance of power asserted itself. Phones captured every second. The intern's voice, steady now, whispered into his recording. They're being fired. Right here. Right now. James lowered his phone, surveying the room with quiet finality. Access revoked. Trust revoked. Consider this. The last time arrogance is allowed to walk unchecked in these halls. The weight of his judgment pressed into every corner, and the message was clear. Power didn't shout. Power acted. And in that moment, Carter Dynamics had been reclaimed by the man who never lost it. The room was no longer a boardroom. It was a courtroom, and the verdict had been delivered. Gregory's badge lay useless on the floor. Julia clutched hers like it might come back to life if she held it tight enough. Thomas stared at his tablet, still refreshing the login screen that would never accept him again. The empire they thought they owned had dissolved in seconds, and the silence left behind was deafening. James Carter stood unmoved at the center of it all. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't broken a sweat. He had dismantled arrogance with precision, one command at a time. Around the edges, witnesses shifted no longer passive. Phones stayed high. The client at the doorway nodded with quiet respect. The intern's hands steadied as he whispered into his camera, "This is what real power looks like." Julia finally broke, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to do this here, in front of everyone." James turned to her, his gaze level. "No, I had to do it here. because you chose to humiliate me here." His words carried no venom, only truth sharpened into a blade. He stepped forward, closer to the fallen badge on the floor, and let his eyes sweep across the room one last time. "You thought fixing an engine was beneath you, but the real failure wasn't in the machine. It was in your dignity." No one spoke. No one dared. He bent, picked up the badge, and set it gently on the table. Plastic, powerless. Then he straightened, every movement deliberate, final. "You tried to erase me with laughter," he said, his voice low, steady, unforgettable. "But I don't need your cameras. I don't need your applause. I am the result of every insult you ever threw." The line dropped like thunder. Phones trembled as they recorded. Even the guards stood frozen, their posture no longer defensive, but reverent. James Carter turned, walking toward the glass doors without haste. The skyline beyond stretched wide, glittering, a city built on his vision. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Because justice had already been served quiet, undeniable, irreversible. And in the silence that followed, every person in that room knew one truth. They would never laugh the same way again.